The primary reproductive organs. The gonads, the ones that make the sex cells, the gametes, right? Gametes are sex cells. Those are sperm and egg. Those are made by ovaries and testes. So when we say primary reproductive male organ, we're not talking about the one that primarily people think about, okay? We're talking about the testes. Now we know a lot about this stuff because we already covered the anatomy and we already covered some hormonal stuff from previous chapters. So we will be just doing some physiology. And to start with, this edition of the textbook has taken out a picture that I was going to use, and I just realized that right before class. So I'm just going to tell you. There is a structure that is called the gubernaculum. How many people heard of that before? I'll spell it for you. So I went to this page. Guber. Nac. You. Lum. And take a wild guess what it's associated with. What's that look like? What's it have on it? Oh, that's the epididymis, right? Where do these little guys end up? In a little sac. Oh, look, we'll put little hairs on it. What's that little sac called? That's called a scrotum. But do you know where these start out? In your abdominal cavity. That is if you're a boy and you have them. And there's a connective tissue cord that pulls it all the way down and actually attaches down to the scrotum. So this gets pulled down prior to birth. So this cord, this connective tissue cord shrinks and it actually pulls those down. And that's why when we saw the male anatomy, there was looping over the vas deferens, or the vas deferens loops over, and we see that because this gets pulled down. Anyway, this connective tissue cord right here that pulls the testes into the scrotum is the gubernaculum. Okay, next thing. Sometimes the testes don't descend all the way. That leads to greatly increased risk for what? Right, testicular cancer. Do you know what we call it when the testes don't fall down, descend? Cryptorchidism. That means hidden testes. Those are testes that do not descend at birth. Is that dangerous? Yeah, it leads to greatly increased risk of testicular cancer. You want to get them down as soon as possible and get them out of the body cavity into the scrotum. Why? It's all about temperature. Body temperature damages testes. Body temperature damages the male reproductive cells once you're past puberty and you're making them. But even the cells that are there previously, they get damaged, and that's not good. One benefit of having the testes down here in this little sac that we call a scrotum is that it is usually about 3 degrees cooler than the body. And that is enough to allow the sperm to develop. Normally, if the sperm were in body temperature, if the testes were at body temperature, it would inhibit sperm production. That's why when women are having a hard time conceiving, they check the husband, they say, hey, are you a truck driver? Do you sit in a seat all day long wearing jeans and heat this area of your body up? Because that's what happens, and that kills sperm. Or they might say, do you get in the hot tub every night after work and have a beer in the hot tub for 20 minutes? Do you know from the lab talk that 104 degrees for 20 minutes will kill all the developing sperm at that moment? However, it takes 70 days or so for them to mature, so you would have to do that every day for 70 days to make sure they were all killed. And then you could have a rogue sperm that could fertilize you. So that is not a safe birth control method. Remember that. That is just for people that are having trouble conceiving. Get out of the hot tub and get in the cold tub. It's better for them, okay? And don't wear tight box briefs and don't wear tight jeans and all that other stuff that would help them to be where they're supposed to, which is in the scrotum, down low, not being pulled up against the body cavity getting warm. What all's in the spermatic cord? Very, very good. And what muscle? Cremaster. I know that's a funny word when we're talking about this stuff, but that's what it's called. That is the muscle in the spermatic cord. What is the muscle down here in the scrotum? Dartos. Dartos muscle. What's the difference? Cremaster pulls them up. Dartos wrinkles the scrotum and makes it get really thick. There's your memory class, memory device class. Enjoy it. That's brilliant. Boys never value long cuddles. I love that. And I won't say your name, but it's very good. Oh, except for John. At least you got a happy face. All right. All right. Next part. Okay, because the active ingredient in there, the important stuff, are these little guys, right? You know, the books are starting to change. They always used to say that sperm made up less than 1% of the volume of semen. Now I read these books and they're saying 10%, but here's what they're doing. They're including all the secretions, the fluid that comes from the testes with that. I prefer to do it the old way so that you get this picture, mental picture in your head that the fluid that comes out, almost none of that is sperm. Why? Because sperm are the smallest cells in the human body. Guess what the biggest is? The egg. The egg's the largest, the sperm are the smallest. And guys produce about how many on average ejaculation? See, this is the number that we used to always say. And I'm still going to give it to you. A normal ejaculate contains 300 million. But the truth of the matter is that since the last 80 years, 50 years, something like that, sperm count has been cut in half. So the numbers, I just got this out of a book before class to get my numbers exactly right. In the 1940s, 116 million sperm for every milliliter of fluid. And how much fluid is ejaculated in a normal ejaculation? 2 to 5 milliliters. So look, that would be, if there were only 2 milliliters, we'd be at 232, right? If there were 3, we'd be at 348 already. Wow. They say now the average is about 66 million per milliliter. And that's not now. That was 20 years ago in 1990. In 1940, it was this. So what do you think it is now? Here's the problem. When you go below 20 million per milliliter, you're functionally sterile. And you're totally sterile if you're below 10. If we keep continuing like this, and it's because of radiation and chemicals that are in our body and cell phones and microwaves and, you know, just the Earth's, the amount of radiation on this planet's going up. They say that if it continues like this in 100 years, that the only babies will be test tube babies because guys will basically be sterile. Look at that. That's 50 years it was cut in half. If it's cut in half another 50, that's down to 33. Another 50, that's down to 18. That's below that if it continues. That's some scary stuff that we really should have scientists addressing, don't you think? And that's a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay, so back to this whole semen thing. Seminal vesicles, what percent? 60. Prostate? 30. And then bulbo? Little old bulbos. Yeah, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5. By the way, it varies. Okay, it varies from person to person, especially the bulbourethral fluid. What is the bulbourethral fluid? No. You make it. You make bulbo. Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah, it's unfortunately, we're going to be throwing some street terms around today, okay? Okay. What is that? That is the fluid that when a man gets aroused, either more or less is produced. It varies significantly from person to person. Some men get aroused and they just have little baby droplets, and some men get aroused and you think, wow, they're already done and they haven't even started. But that's because genetically, people are different. And some bulbourethral glands make more early, some make more later. What's the purpose of that fluid, though? Neutralize the residue that's in the urethra from urine. Because urine, we know, is acidic. Acid kills sperm. So if a man produces this alkaline secretion, which it is, what will it do? It will neutralize the pH, which will help to protect the sperm. Plus, it lubricates the urethra, which helps the rest of the semen to come out. And the easier it gets out, the closer it's going to get up to the cervix, and the easier it'll then move into the woman. It's all about fertilization every time. Some people use birth control because they don't want to get pregnant. Whether it's a pill, or whether it's a condom, or an IUD, or what have you, nothing's 100% if a penis is by a vagina. Okay? The only pure way to not get pregnant is never have any sperm there. That's the only way you're safe. There can be sperm in pre-ejaculatory fluid. In the bulbourethral, absolutely there can be, because it depends on the guy. Not always are the secretions all released at the same time. When a guy is leaking, there can be sperm. We say that they're sterile here, but we all know it only takes one to fertilize. Really, it doesn't. It takes millions of little boogers pounding on it, releasing their little things called acrosomes, like little nuclear warheads exploding on the oocyte to try to get in there. But the truth of the matter is, in the right circumstance, you don't know how many. So that's where little surprise babies come from sometimes, because people are like, well, I didn't even. Well, guess what? The Lone Ranger got up there and found his way. Right? Yeah, what's this called? What's this? Flagellum. Right? There's a little mid-piece here. And what's his little hat called? Do you remember? Was it in? Yeah, the whole thing's the head, but there's a little cap on it. Do you know? acrosome. An acrosome. That's the tip. I should draw it better, but you can look it up in the book if you want to see it. Acrosome. An acrosome is the tip of the head, and it contains enzymes to break down the coating on the egg. That's why all the sperm, have you ever watched one of those science shows that show the sperm on the egg? And man, they're just flapping and kicking, right? But their little heads are exploding. Those digestive enzymes are breaking down the egg, and then eventually one starts to wiggle in, and only the head gets in. Why? Because that's where the DNA is located. And that's where the DNA from the boy comes in. It's right there. And in the egg, see, we're going to pretend this is an egg now because look how big it is. Actually, an egg's about 80,000 times the size of a sperm. I don't ask that on the test. But it's huge compared. Okay? 80,000 times is a number I heard sometimes. But I won't ask you that. In the egg, the females have DNA. And I don't know if you know this, but they have these too. What is that? Good, that's a mitochondria. Did you know that all the mitochondria in the sperm are right here in the midpiece? The little neck part is called the midpiece. So humans never get mitochondria from dad. Humans always get their mitochondria from mom. So they can trace your lineage through your mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial. So that's what they use a lot of times when they do DNA testing for paternity. They use mitochondrial DNA. They can use it. All right, prostate fluid, 30%. What's in it? Did I do any of that on the lab talk? No? So, boy, I'm going to have to save this again and do some. And I want to talk about other stuff. I'm not going to separate all the fluids out except the bulbo. For seminal vesicle and prostate, I'll just tell you what all it does because it's just fascinating, to be honest with you. First off, so we're just talking about semen. It has fructose in it. Why? For ATP, perfect. There's also, and by the way, this is more from the prostate fluid, but you don't need to know. That's more in the seminal vesicle. This is more in prostate, but I will not ask you guys this. Citric acid from the prostate, where does it go? See, this goes into Krebs, and this goes into glycolysis. And they both are there to make what? ATP. Overall, we say the secretions are alkaline, even though the prostate fluid is acidic, but we're not going to worry about that. In prostatic fluid, there's something called PSA. Do you know what that stands for? Prostate-specific antigen, PSA. And they use that for a prostate cancer check. They say if your PSA goes up, you're more likely to have prostate cancer. However, it's not a perfect test. There are both false positives that say you have it when you don't, and there are false negatives, which are really worse, which says you're okay and you have cancer. Prostaglandins were first discovered in semen. You guys know what they are. They're localized hormones, aren't they? Little tissue hormones that act in the local area. And they call, all prostaglandins are called prostaglandins because they found them in semen and they thought they were made by the prostate. And here's the crazy thing. Later on, they found out they were made, actually, by the seminal vesicles. And so the whole name of prostaglandins in the human body is misnamed. Because they thought it was prostate. And it wasn't. It was seminal vesicle. But either way, that doesn't matter. The job of these are just amazing. They take the female cervix and they thin out the mucus. Because females have a mucus that the cervix produces, and when you're close to ovulating, it tends to get thicker through your cycle. That's how you can tell when you ovulate, is you can palpate and get cervical mucus and put it between your fingers. They do this for fertility, so you know when you're fertile. And if you can string it between your fingers and it doesn't break, then that's usually when you're ovulating. So you check your cervical mucus, it tells you when you're ovulating, you know when you can get pregnant. It's really pretty cool. Well, the chemicals there thin that out, and this is so cool, so the sperm can get through. So they temporarily thin it out. And they cause uterine contractions in reverse. Reverse uterine peristalsis. That means the uterus contracts in such a way that it starts to pull sperm in. That's cool. See, your body's trying to get you pregnant every time. Dilates the cervix as well. Also decrease the female's immune response in that localized area. Why? So it doesn't kill the sperm. That's just cool. You mean that semen is important? Those aren't the sperm, but it's important because it protects the sperm. The other thing, you're going to love this one. Was this on the lab? It wasn't at all, was it? Are you gelling? It was? Yeah? Okay. There's a chemical called seminogelin. They're now trying to change the name because I guess they thought that was just too cool for school. And they're not calling it that anymore, but I'm still calling it that because it's easy to remember. The semen clumps up. And the reason it clumps up is because the female's pH is acidic. And it would kill the sperm and cause them to be real slow and sluggish, and they'd die. Seminogelin clumps them together in the middle of the semen, and then only after they are released, about 10 to 15 minutes or so, it starts to liquefy. So this holds them together. And they say that actually the PSA, prostate-specific antigen, liquefies the sperm. Sorry, sperm, I mean semen. Not the sperm. Those are the little cells. Oh, at what age do guys get testicular cancer? Usually 15 to 35. Okay? See, people usually don't start thinking about cancer till they hit about 40. Right? I mean, think about it. Most of y'all are young. Most of y'all don't think about getting cancer. It happens to young people all the time, but we don't think about it. When you're a female, they teach you how to do a breast self-exam. How many teenage girls do breast self-exams every month? What do you think? Not many. And fortunately for women, breast cancer is higher as you age. Commonly, that's how it works. For guys, it's the opposite. How many guys do you think do testicular exams every month? That's not a testicular exam, by the way, just so you know. And that's not just every month, just so you know. Okay? So the whole point is, guys in that age range, if they ever touch their testes even, they're definitely not touching them to palpate them to feel for cancer. And they're not aware of that, and they don't even think of it. But that's the age that it hits them. Okay? So that's kind of sad, because they're almost never checking for it. A zygote is a fertilized egg. So that's what you're trying to do. Every time that you utilize your reproductive system is doing everything it can to make little zygotes, right? For the sperm to meet the egg to fertilize. I'm just curious, by a show of hands, please. Yes, we're on integrity. Tell me, the last time you used this system, how many people in here were trying to reproduce?
That's 0.
Wow. All right. You know, I'm just keeping stats for future classes, so I could say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 0. We'll see as the week goes on what's going to happen with the classes. I'm curious also, how many girls in here got pregnant on the pill? Have been pregnant on the pill? Just one? How many girls in here have babies? Just 4, 5. Uh-huh. So that's 20%. I had a lab once where 7 girls in that lab had got pregnant on the pill. I asked my night class the other day, I believe 3 of them were pregnant on the pill. It's crazy how many people get pregnant on the pill. Just so you know, there's lots of ways to do numbers and lots of ways to do statistics. You can't always believe everything that you hear. And the numbers they give are astronomically high, and when you start asking people, it's nowhere near that. And not everybody uses it wrong, you know, enough to account for that. So I'm just saying, there is no perfect birth control. If you're doing it, or even almost doing it, you know, babies can come from that. That's how they work their little way into the world. Condoms break. Other stuff doesn't work right. If you're smoking, it decreases how the pill works. There's just all kinds of stuff that happens. And some babies are just trying to be born. So, you know. So your bodies are working to fertilize, even when you don't want to. Sperm that have 2 heads and 2 tails, they now know that these sperm attack and fight foreign sperm. However they got there. He found out by taking sperm and mixing sperm, semen, really, in a petri dish and look at it under a microscope, and they could see these sperm actually fighting like a little gang war, trying to kill each other. I mean, it's crazy. These little ninja sperm all fighting to the death. And why these are the good fighters? Because they're bigger. Man, if you have 2 tails or 2 heads, you weigh more than the other sperm. So you're going to punk them, basically, is what happens. So these sperm, they hang out in the fornix. And they swim around in the fornix, and they don't get up there to fertilize. They really hang out to find foreign sperm. One of the studies that he did is he realized that sperm count stays the same whether a couple has sex regularly or not. It doesn't seem to matter. You know, if they're having sex every day, the sperm count's about the same. If they only have sex once a week, when they do have sex, there might be a change in volume, but there's usually not a change in overall number of sperm. At least that's what he found. So here's what he did. He thought, I wonder if that's true in all cases. And one of the things he did, I'm sure he did lots of other things, but one of the things he did was this. He took, with his staff, the wives in this study, he took them all out of the country. They went on a vacation to another country for a week. And when they got back to town, they were instructed to go be with their man and to capture the semen. And they measured the sperm count. Guess what happened? 700 million. It went up. Now remember, if a couple just chooses to not have sex for a few days, it doesn't impact usually the overall sperm count. But when the women went out of town, sperm counts went up in the guys. Regardless of what the guy was thinking, regardless of the commitment level, regardless of whether they were really part of the group that was hoping to have a baby or not have a baby, this happened. That means guy can't control it. That means sperm count is something that is not controlled by us. However, certain factors affect it. Okay? And one thing that can be used, this is how we look at this. So if you want to have a baby and you're having problems, can you use this to your advantage? Track your cycle, chart when you ovulate, figure out when you ovulate, and you know that you need to have sex when you're ovulating so that the egg can get fertilized. So what do? You find out your cycle, and eventually once you chart your cycle, if it's regular, you could take a little vacation and go out of town the week before you ovulate and come back the day that you're going to be ovulating, and guess what? The sperm count's double, you have a better chance of conceiving. How cool is that? I think everything else on this one we've already talked about. So that means we've really, in this class, we've really covered most, not all, but most of the male stuff. Oh, okay. This is, remember how we said that in 1990, sperm count was measured at that number per milliliter, right? 116. That's at 1940. At 1990, it was down to 66 million, which is real close to half. If it goes down to half in 50 more years, that would be 33 million. And in 50 more years, that would be 17 million on average. That would put us in 100 years below the sterility level. That's scary. Hopefully it won't continue. I wish they'd do a study and see where it is now. My guess is it's going to be below the 66 now, that it is still dropping. Can you imagine it doesn't drop when half the people on the planet are now carrying cell phones in their pockets right by their gonads? And those cell phones are not turned off usually. They're on, and they're pinging the tower all the time. And signals are coming back and forth between that phone. Every time you get a text, every time you put a laptop in your lap. What does that mean? Erectile dysfunction. Look at how we know that word. What did it used to be called? Impotence, not impotent. Okay? Impotence. That means what? Inability to achieve an erection long enough for the act. No. My frown's supposed to be upside down. There we go. Is that acceptable and suitable to the class now? All right, there we go. That's why, as we know, that's the symbol for male, but we can also draw it like that. All right. What causes that? Aha, now we get quiet. None of us know because it would never happen to any of us. Okay, so it could be, really? You mean it could be hormonal? Sure, it could be hormonal. Absolutely, it could be hormonal. What else could it be? Think of a stress that might produce this condition. Well, sometimes they produce the other condition too. So stress stimulates what nervous system? Sympathetic. And the ability to achieve an erection is parasympathetic. An erection is parasympathetic, guys. It is not sympathetic. No matter what you think. You think excitement, you think all that. Really, your body rest and digest and this all go together. That's the concept. So therefore, if you're sympathetic, if you're stressed out, that would have negative impact on the ability to achieve erections. See, back in the day, like in the 70s and the 80s, when they talked about impotence, it was always the type A-driven businessman that was flying from coast to coast and real busy and had all this stuff on his mind, had problems with this. Of course, never wanted to talk about it. Back then, they didn't have a pill they could take either. They had to cut you open and put a pump in there, you know, like the shoes, except not the shoes. And there weren't a lot of options. And there was stress, because sympathetics kill it. And also, stress plays a role in cardiac function, doesn't it? And heart disease. And they now know, and I mean, we've known for a long time, it's all about the blood flow. Well, I was going to write flow first, and then I wrote blood, and I don't know. I never. Blood, let's rephrase that. It's all about blood flow. A blood flow. See, the penis does not have a bone in it, or it would be hard all the time. Okay? That's how it would work. If you get plaquing in your arteries, it decreases blood flow to certain areas. It shows up really early in that body part. That is why drugs like Viagra work. Do you know what they do? You know what Viagra does? I got to be careful not to write ninja now. Yes, they cause nitric oxide to be released to the blood vessel, which we know already from previous classes. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator. That increases blood flow. See, an erection is not about muscle contraction. A guy can't contract their muscles and get one. There are lots of other causes, like diabetes and many other things that can affect it too, but these are the most important for you guys to understand. Erection is parasympathetic. What's this? What is that? Define that for me first. Yeah, expulsion of semen. Very good. That's what it is. What's this? Because they're not the same thing. We think about them the same. Usually this happens when this happens, but they are not the same. This is lots of stuff that's associated with that, but is not the same as that. This is the whole sensory part, the way that you feel. Where do you feel everything that you feel? Orgasm is between your ears, not between your legs. Okay? It's between your ears. It happens in the brain. It's a massive release of chemicals in the brain in different parts of the brain. So you might feel it in parts that aren't your genitals. This is all about muscle contraction. That's what pushes stuff. And this is sensory. And so they are different.